early voter turnout, I mean, it quite literally has been massive. But then I look at the numbers from the likes of Iowa. Biden is slipping in the polls to Trump there. What are the stakes in terms of the polls being out? Good morning.
Good morning, Manus. Well, I do want to first start off with that first point about the early turnout, because that has just been sky high. We've had over 90 million votes cast so far. That is about 66% of the total votes in 2016. We're seeing more, and that's a big deal for the US because they relatively have a lower turnout. We're seeing more younger people voting. We're seeing fewer undecided voters as well. And you mentioned it last hour, though. Despite this early record turnout, we are actually seeing Black and Latino voters lagging thus far. But if we look at the polls, we're seeing Biden leading more than 8 percentage points over Trump in the national polls, and also the state polls in some of those key battleground states. Now, the ones you really want to watch here, Pennsylvania, that one could clinch a win for Biden if it goes blue. And Biden has said it himself about Florida, that if Florida goes blue, it could be over for Trump. And we're also watching those Midwestern states here, Michigan and Wisconsin as well.
It's interesting, again, going back to the demographics, Ritika, isn't it? You got this under-turnout in states like Florida for Black and Latino voters. I'm looking at the ABC latest poll breaking on Twitter. Florida is a toss-up, Ritika. Joe Biden leads by 7 points in Pennsylvania. So let's talk about if this does go down to a crunch, Ritika. It's now assumed that the president will litigate, and he has got the tilt of the Supreme Court on his side, hasn't he?
Well, you're quite right. Trump's position has always been that if I don't win the election, then it's likely to have been rigged, and then he will probably fall back or hope to have the support of a Supreme Court weighted in his favor. And there is a high possibility that this election will be contested and that we won't have a clear answer by November the 4th. And that's because it is a complicated process with counting these votes. There are different rules in different states for how and when they are counted. For instance, in North Carolina, they have a 9-day extension period within which to count these votes. And we've already had hundreds of lawsuits over the absentee ballots and those mail-in ballots as well. And U.S. officials actually coming out today and saying that if the election is that close, then that could fuel Russian election meddling and disinformation, and that could likely attempt to undermine Joe Biden's campaign.
And how's this all playing out against the COVID backdrop? The numbers simply do not look good, do they?
No, they don't at all, Manus. And we already saw that Trump's approval rating coming into this election was very low. And that is partly down to the way that he has handled COVID. He has had these huge rallies which do appeal to his core base. They often have huge crowds, not always wearing masks, not always social distancing. There was actually a University of Stanford study that came out late Friday that said that his rallies from June to September actually caused 30,000 coronavirus cases. So that has drawn a lot of criticism, particularly from the opposition. Joe Biden having a very different approach, having much more virtual rallies going into this election. So we've seen different approaches, and we've also just seen how politicized the coronavirus has become.